At first glance, the USNS Seay, docked at Naval Station San Diego, looks just like any other commercial cargo ship. But in reality, it is a massive arsenal in disguise. In the next 48 hours, this ship will swallow 742 Marine Corps combat vehicles. The total value of the cargo inside, $1.8 billion. Military observers call this the $1.8 billion gamble. Why? Because the US Navy is concentrating a massive amount of hardware into a single hull. In a real conflict, this ship isn't just a transport vessel. It is a fat, juicy target. A single anti-ship missile hitting a critical spot could wipe out the equipment of an entire Marine brigade, and $1.8 billion of American taxpayer money will sink to the ocean floor. But before worrying about enemy missiles, the crew must face another silent killer, present even before the ship leaves the dock: ocean physics. Transporting this hardware halfway around the world is much more complex than just throwing stuff on a boat and sailing away. In fact, there are thousands of hidden steps in this process, where an error measured in inches could cause the ship to list, or worse, lose billions of dollars in equipment. How do you cram 8,000 tons of steel into a ship without making it capsize? How do you keep a 68-ton tank stationary when the ship is in free fall between 30-foot swells? And why is a $2 roll of tape just as important as a $1 million radar system? Welcome inside the most insane military transport process on the planet. This morning begins with the Marines of Combat Logistics Regiment 1. The first vehicle rolling onto the ramp is a 68-ton M1A1 Abrams monster. The driver of this vehicle cannot afford to make a mistake. He is driving a 68-ton block of steel from a dead stop up a 12-degree steel incline, a surface covered in salt spray and slick hydraulic fluid. He has to keep the turbine engine at exactly 800 RPM. Any higher, the tracks will spin on the non-skid coating. Any lower, the tank will stall mid-ramp and won't be able to restart. But why does this tank go first? It's not random. It goes first because of something called a load plan. This is a massive instruction manual that dictates the position of every single vehicle down to the inch. This plan exists because of a deadly number: the ship's center of gravity. On a ship like the USNS Seay, when empty, the center of gravity sits about 30 feet above the keel. Think of it like the fulcrum of a seesaw. When the ship is empty, it balances perfectly. But when you start loading 8,000 tons of equipment into it, this number starts dancing wildly. Load too many tanks to the left, the ship lists to port. Load too much weight forward, the bow dips into the water. Instead of riding over the waves, the ship will plow through them. Load too much aft, the propellers come out of the water, spinning aimlessly in the air. The load plan must keep the center of gravity of this 950-foot-long ship within a maximum margin of error of 6 inches. Just 6 inches. So, this Abrams isn't just going inside the ship. It is going to an exact coordinate. Position Charlie 7 on deck 3, facing starboard, turret traversed to 270 degrees. Why must the turret turn? Because the turret alone weighs 22 tons. Point it forward, you've just moved 22 tons forward. Point it backward, you've moved 22 tons aft. Multiply that variance by dozens of tanks, and the ship's trim will be off by 2 degrees, enough to cause a disaster in a storm. Once the vehicle is in position, the real battle with physics begins. Marines immediately duck under the vehicle with chains. This tank needs 22 chains, each rated for a 15,000-pound load. Why so many chains for a stationary vehicle? Because in the middle of the Pacific, the ship might encounter 30-foot swells. When the ship drops into a trough, the tank experiences negative G-force and literally wants to float off the deck. When the ship rises on a crest, the tank takes 2 Gs, suddenly weighing 136 tons instead of 68. But the number of chains isn't everything. The secret lies in the angles. Each chain must be lashed at an angle between 30 and 60 degrees. This is survival math. At a 45-degree angle, the chain provides its maximum holding force of 15,000 pounds. At 30 degrees, it still retains about 7,500 pounds of vertical force. But if a rookie makes a mistake and drops that angle to 10 degrees, the holding power plummets to just 2,600 pounds. Get the angle wrong, and when the first storm hits, the tank will snap the chains. It will become a 68-ton wrecking ball rolling freely inside the ship's belly. It will crush the Humvees next to it, and worse, could puncture the hull from the inside. That's why they use load binders to multiply pulling force by 30 times, tightening until it won't budge, then backing off exactly 1/4 turn. Why back it off? To prepare for the next enemy, temperature. As the cargo doors close and the USNS Seay leaves port, these 742 vehicles enter a harsh world engineers call 90 days of degradation. Traversing the tropics, the temperature inside the decks fluctuates wildly. By day, the cargo hold turns into a 130-degree Fahrenheit oven. By night, it drops to 50 degrees. This 80-degree swing repeats every single day, creating a deadly physical phenomenon, thermal expansion. This is exactly why the Marine has to back the binder off a 1/4 turn. Metal expands when hot. A chain tightened to the max in a cool 70-degree San Diego morning becomes a ticking time bomb by a 95-degree afternoon. The increased tension from thermal expansion is enough to snap the steel chain, turning the tank loose even in calm seas. But temperature is just the opening act. The real assassin is what you're breathing: salt air. Transport ships aren't submarines. They aren't airtight. Salt air invades through ventilation systems, door gaskets, and cargo hatches. It clings to every exposed metal surface. Aluminum corrodes into white powder. Steel blooms into orange rust. The most dangerous part is the brake system. Within weeks, a layer of rust forms on the brake rotors and effectively welds the brake pads to the disc. When they arrive, the wheels won't turn. They'll just skid. And for sophisticated electronics worth tens of thousands of dollars, salt air is poison. Salt creeps through the tiniest gaps, corroding circuit boards into patches of green fuzz. Just one drop of condensation inside a thermal sight, and mold starts growing on the germanium lens. The result? A $20,000 targeting system becomes scrap, and a gunner is blinded on the battlefield. That is why $50,000 SyncGARS radio systems must be completely removed, wrapped in vapor barrier bags with desiccant packs before the ship leaves the pier. The obsessively thorough preparation continues with the vehicle's power source, batteries. You might think just turning the key off is enough. Wrong. On modern vehicles, even with the engine off, there are silent vampires called parasitic draws. Computers, clocks, alarm systems. They will drain a battery dry in just a few weeks. After 3 months, that battery isn't just empty, it's chemically dead. The lead plates inside become sulfated, forming crystals that permanently prevent recharging. A $200 battery becomes trash. That is why Marines must physically disconnect and tape every single battery terminal. But the biggest nightmare lies deep in the fuel tank. Look inside the fuel tank of this 7-ton truck. Before loading, it's only filled to 1/4 capacity. Why? Because fuel expands with heat, and a full tank in San Diego becomes a messy spill on the deck in the tropics. But the bigger problem is stratification. After 90 days of sitting still, diesel fuel begins to separate. Heavy molecules sink, light molecules float. The biocide that prevents algae growth settles to the bottom. Lubricity additives meant to protect injection pumps float to the top. That's not all. Humid air condenses on the cold ship walls, creating artificial rain inside the cargo hold. Water runs down, creeps through breather tubes, and enters the fuel tank. Water is heavier than oil. It sinks to the bottom and lies in wait. When the ship docks and the driver turns the key for the first time in 3 months, the fuel pump won't suck clean diesel. It will suck in a mixture of water and sludge. The result is immediate destruction of the injectors. What went onto the ship were 742 perfect war machines. What arrives are 742 rusty corpses with dead batteries and degraded fuel. And now, the sailors and Marines face their biggest challenge: resurrecting this army in less than 6 hours. When the USNS Seay docks, the offloading process isn't simply reversing the loading order. It is a completely different race. First obstacle: the chains. After 90 days of thermal cycling, chains, once tightened to 5,000 pounds, might now be under much higher tension or rusted shut. To release a load binder, a Marine has to apply reverse force for about 15 rotations. If lucky, they need 50 pounds of force. If the chain is corroded, they need 150 pounds, and sometimes giant bolt cutters. As soon as the vehicles are dragged out of the ship's belly, they go straight to the resurrection zone behind the port. Here, the Marines have a deadly deadline: 4 hours. They have exactly 4 hours to turn these 742 rusting, ailing blocks of iron into a combat brigade ready to fire. This operation is like a field emergency room. First, the heart: batteries. A skilled Marine can swap a Humvee battery in 3 minutes, but that's if the battery hold-down hasn't corroded. If acid has leaked and eaten the tray, they lose 10 minutes fighting it with penetrating oil and pliers. Next is the blood: fuel. Water has infiltrated the system. To fix it, they have to crack open each fuel injector while someone else cranks the engine. Diesel mixed with water sprays out until a clean stream appears. Then they tighten it and move to the next cylinder. But the most dangerous are the invisible damages. Turbochargers have sat still for months. The bearings might be stuck. If you force it to spin up to 100,000 RPM immediately, it could self-destruct, firing metal shards into the combustion chamber. And the brakes? Mechanics walk down the line of vehicles, tapping each brake drum with a rubber mallet. A clear bong means healthy metal. A dull thud means rust has seized the brakes. Those vehicles are flagged immediately. They cannibalize parts from one vehicle to another. Platoon 1 needs 4 Humvees, but 2 have blown tires? They'll strip tires from Platoon 2's vehicles. Why the 4-hour rush? Why not take 2 days to repair them leisurely? The answer lies in a painful lesson from history that many have forgotten. In 1982, during the Falklands War, the British military lost the Atlantic conveyor to a single Exocet missile. That ship was carrying Chinook helicopters and the war's most critical equipment. When it sank, British transport capability sank with it. Today, the USNS Seay, docked with $1.8 billion in equipment, is a fat, juicy target. A modern anti-ship missile could turn this entire logistics effort into ash. The US accepts the risk of consolidating everything into one giant ship instead of 10 smaller ones, trading security for speed and scale. But the price is vulnerability at the destination. Every minute the ship sits at the pier, and every minute the 742 vehicle convoy hasn't dispersed inland, is a minute they are gambling with death. Repair speed isn't just technical, it is a survival tactic. Exactly 4 hours after the first vehicle rolled off the ship, Convoy number 1 begins moving toward the front lines. The engines might not sound perfect, the exhaust might be blacker than usual, but they are moving. In less than a day, the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps have performed a miracle, moving a town's worth of equipment halfway around the world, fighting gravity, temperature, seawater, and time. We are often mesmerized by the explosion of missiles or the speed of fighter jets, but the true power of a military superpower lies here, in a 400-page load plan, in the tap of a hammer checking brakes, and in the ability to turn 8,000 tons of stationary iron into a steel fist anywhere in the world. The USNS Seay raises its ramp and turns out to sea, leaving behind 742 vehicles ready for combat. Mission accomplished. The gamble paid off. But the question for you is, in the era of hypersonic missiles and cheap drones, is this American all eggs in one basket strategy still effective? Or is it an Achilles heel waiting to be exploited? Let me know your opinion in the comments. I am navydoc. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to decode the next giant war machines with us. Goodbye and see you next time.